Hey everybody. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. If anybody pops in, I can catch them up. So today what we're going to talk about, I've lost my connection, so I'm just gonna wait just a second. What does that mean? Hey everybody. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So tonight what we're going to talk about is Napoleon's Empire. Just to give you a little bit of background, in 1804, Napoleon named himself Emperor of the French. At what's known as the Brilliant Coronation Ceremony in Paris, the people witnessed an astonishing act. Napoleon took the crown from the Pope's hand and placed it on his own head. Napoleon's actions spoke loudly of his intentions to be a strong ruler. So hopefully through our readings you'll see how the French government had been transformed from some sort of democracy to an empire in just a few short years. So after Napoleon's successful overthrow of the Directory in 1799, Napoleon proclaimed a new constitution, which theoretically established a republic. The constitution actually set up a dictatorship, a government headed by an absolute ruler. The executive branch was a committee of 3 members called consuls, and they took their titles from ancient Rome. Napoleon, however, became the first consul and quickly concentrated the power in his hand. So his first order of business was to restore order. He wanted to bring order to the country. So one of his first goals was to restructure the government. He tried to keep many of the revolutionary reforms. Napoleon replaced the elected local officials with men he appointed himself. He also placed education under his control of the national government, creating technical schools, universities, and secondary schools. Napoleon also changed the country's financial system. He created the Bank of France and required that every citizen pay taxes. The collected taxes were deposited in the bank and used by the government to make loans to businesses. And these changes gradually brought inflation and high prices under control. A lot of Napoleon's supporters welcomed a strong government and the peace and order it brought. In 1892, he named himself consul for life, which this proved to be approved by a popular vote. So my first question for you guys was to discuss the changes brought by the Napoleonic codes. So a lot of historians believe that Napoleon made his greatest impact on French law. The old feudal royal laws were often contradictory and confusing. To make French law clear and consistent, Napoleon had a new law code written, commonly known as the Napoleonic Codes. It was based on Enlightenment ideas such as equality of all citizens before the law, religious toleration, and advancement based on merit. However, the code placed the state above the individual. And this is something different that we see in our own Constitution. We have a Bill of Rights. That's the first 10 amendments of our Constitution, which gives rights to the individual and not so much to the state. But in Napoleon's case, in France's case, for example, it limited the freedom of speech and the press by allowing the censorship of books and plays and pamphlets. Women also lost many of their rights that they had gained during the Revolution, and male heads of household were given extensive authority over wives and minor children. In addition, Napoleon made peace with the Catholic Church. He realized that French Catholics had objected to the civil constitution of the clergy. He negotiated an agreement called the Concordat of 1801 with Pope Pius the Seventh. And so in this agreement, Napoleon acknowledges that Catholicism was the religion of the majority of the French people, but affirmed religious toleration for all. Napoleon did, however, retain the right to name all bishops who had to swear allegiance to the state. The Pope agreed to this, to accept this, the loss of church lands. In return, the state agreed to pay salaries to the Catholic clergy. So, at the height of Napoleon's empire, this is what France had gained. So here in our, let's see if I can do this. So here we see in the green that this is Napoleon's empire right here. This pink right here is under his control, Napoleon's control. Here are Napoleon's allies. It's going to include Spain and Norway. And this line right here lays out his campaign in Russia. So looking at this map, what geographic factors helped protect Great Britain and Russia from conquest of Napoleon's army? What geographic factors? Well, for Great Britain, it's an island, right? So you're kind of going, and because of this island, Great Britain has a very strong navy. Okay, that ran into Napoleon. Here you have the Ural Mountains. We're talking about geographic features. So, essentially, or eventually, Napoleon is defeated. His empire comes down. So, when Russia joins the movement against Napoleon, it signals the end of the empire. Tsar Alexander I of Russia viewed Napoleon's control of Europe as a threat to Russia. Additionally, Napoleon's continental system had hurt the Russian economy. 1811, Alexander withdrew from the continental system and resumed trade with Britain. So the Russian blow to Napoleon's power ruined Napoleon from all directions. His enemies, Russians, Prussians, Spaniards, English, Austrians, Italians, sent armies against Napoleon's forces. Russia and Prussia announced a war of liberation, which was joined by Austria. They defeated Napoleon at Leipzig in Saxony, part of the present-day Germany, in October 1813. So by March 1814, the Allies were in Paris, forcing Napoleon to surrender and abdicate as emperor. The victors restored the French throne to Louis the 16th. Sorry, Louis the 18th. Who was a member of the Bourbon family and brother of Louis the 16th. Napoleon was exiled to Elba Island off the coast of Italy. The boundaries of France were reduced to those of 1792. Still determined to rule, Napoleon returned to France on March 1st, 1815, easily won widespread popular support. The troops of the restored king, Louis XVIII, deserted their commander when Napoleon announced, your general summoned to the throne by the prayer of the people and raised upon your shields is now restored to you. Come join him. So in a period known as the 100 Days, Napoleon reigned as emperor to avoid war. He announced that France wanted no more territory. The European governments, however, feared that Napoleon might regain his former strength. And determined to stop him, the armies of Prussia, Great Britain, and the Netherlands advanced towards France under the command of the Duke of Wellington. Napoleon met them at Waterloo in the Austrian Netherlands, in June 1815. The French troops were decisively defeated. Napoleon was then placed under house arrest on the island of St. Helena in the South Atlantic. He died there in 1821. So, in looking at Napoleon's legacy, he did not allow a true representative government. He did, however, secure the revolution in France and spread throughout Europe ideas such as equality before the law, religious toleration, and advancement by merit rather than by birth. Napoleon's rule also set uniform standards of government, reformed tax systems, promoted education, and improved agriculture and industry. After the collapse of Napoleon's empire, many Europeans still wanted to keep these benefits from the French Revolution. They especially did not forget their taste of freedom from absolute monarchy. So now to try to restore peace in Europe, we go to the Congress of Vienna. All right, there we go. So, Austria's chief minister, Prince Clemens von Metternich, served as host to the Congress of Vienna and presided over it. He believed that in order to establish European stability, Europe should be restored to the way it was before the French Revolution. To achieve his goal, Metternich maintained that settlements reached Vienna would be guided by three principles: compensation, legitimacy, and balance of power. Compensation meant that all countries should be repaid for the expenses they incurred while fighting the French. Legitimacy, according to Metternich, meant restoring power of the royal families who had ruled before Napoleon. And finally, balance of power meant that no country could ever again dominate Central Europe. So here we go, redrawing the maps. As the victors of the war claimed their rewards, they redrew this map of Europe. France was forced to give up its recently gained territory and to pay a large indemnity or compensation for the other countries for war damages. Although Great Britain did not gain any land in continental Europe, it took from France most of its remaining islands in the West Indies. Austria gained the Italian provinces of Lombardy and Venetia, as well as territory on the eastern coast of the Adriatic Sea. At the conference, Prussia and Russia also made it known that they wanted to expand their borders by seizing formerly French-held lands, yet Great Britain and Austria feared that increased Prussian and Russian influence in Central Europe would lead to an imbalance of power on the continent. So, to put pressure on Prussia and Russia, Great Britain and Austria made an agreement with France. The agreement bound the three powers, Great Britain, Austria, and France, to resist any further Prussian or Russian territorial expansion in Europe by armed force if it was necessary. So in the end, a compromise was reached. Prussia received extensive territories along the Rhine River and almost half of the Kingdom of Saxony for its compensation. Russia received most of the Polish territory formerly held by Prussia and Austria. This increased Polish territory held by Russia. A new kingdom of Poland was then formed under the Tsar. So, this is what the results were for a new Europe after the Congress of Vienna. And there were the restoring of the monarchies. Once the territories were settled, delegates of the Congress returned to the stabilizing of European governments. It was believed that the divine right monarchy was necessary for proper order. The delegates made settlements based on legitimate claims to the throne and restored absolute monarchs who ruled Europe before Napoleon. The Congress reestablished the royal dynasties in France, Spain, Portugal, Naples, Sardinia, and Sicily. In France, the Congress officially recognized the Bourbon heir, Louis XVIII, as the legitimate or legal ruler. So, after much turmoil, France is then brought back to its just about original state. But in summary of these, the French Revolution and Napoleon, the French Revolution's ideas of liberty, equality, fraternity continue to inspire people around the world. In parts of Africa, China, the Middle East, and Latin America, people of diverse backgrounds struggle for political freedom. Many of these struggles have been ignited by feelings of nationalism as people yearn for self-rule and the return of their traditions. As Napoleon learned in the collapse of his empire, even the strictest military control cannot suppress the power of nationalism. All right, so next week what we're going to look at is industrialization and see how getting the industry gets us back to work. As always, if you have any questions, need to reach out to me, please feel free to do so. I'd be more than happy to hear from you. And I will see you next week. Thank you for listening.